Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This lecture deals with the literary terms which are very important for the students of English literature. Literary terms refer to the technique, style and formatting used by the writers and speakers to masterfully emphasize, embellish or strengthen their compositions. In this lecture, we are going to discuss 70 literary terms. Allegory. Allegory is a type of writing in which each character or event is a symbol representing an idea, quality or concept. An allegory generally teaches a lesson by means of an interesting story. So, there are three important elements of an allegory. Number one, it has symbolic characters. Number two, it teaches some lesson. And number three, it is an interesting story. For example, you have read The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde. So that story is an allegory as it includes these three elements. Alliteration. Alliteration is actually a poetic device with which a poet creates music in a line of poetry. So it is the repetition of the initial consonant sounds of words in a phrase, line or sentence. For example, wailing in the winter wind. Here W sound is used as alliteration. It creates music in the line. There is another example. What is this life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare. Stand and stare. The sound SS, stand and stare. That is alliteration. Allusion. Allusion is something said or written that refers to something in literature, history, mythology, or religious texts, etc. It is generally considered common knowledge. For example, Achilles' heel. Achilles' heel, that is a weakness in a person. So, ambiguity. Ambiguity is the quality of having more than one interpretations or meanings. So, it is a quality that a piece of writing may have. Analogy. Analogy is a comparison between two dissimilar things to clarify the meaning. For example, the teacher drew an analogy between human heart and a pump. Anagnorisis. Anagnorisis is the discovery of knowledge. It is the point in a plot where the character understands the true state of affairs. Or it is a moment in a plot or story, specifically a tragedy, wherein the main character either recognizes or identifies his or her true nature, recognizes the other character's true identity, discovers the true nature of his situation or that of the others, leading to the resolution of the story. For example, in Oedipus Rex, anagnorisis occurs when a messenger comes and reveals to King Oedipus his true birth. Antagonist. Antagonist is a type of character. Antagonist is the character or force that opposes the protagonist. It can be a character, an animal, a force, or a weakness of the character. For example, Iago in Shakespeare's play Othello. Apostrophe. Apostrophe is the device of calling out to an imaginary or absent person, place, or object. It is usually used in poetry. For example, O death, where is thy sting? Here death is addressed. So it is apostrophe. Assonance. Assonance is also a poetic device. It is the repetition of the similar vowel sounds in words or syllables. For example, fit as fiddle. So here the I sound is assonance. Aside. Aside is a remark or passage in a play that is intended to be heard by the audience but unheard by the other characters in the play. Astrophic. Astrophic means irregular in arrangement. It is the stanza having no particular pattern. In other words, it refers to lyric poetry that is not written in stanza form. Ballad. Ballad is a kind of poem narrating the adventurous story of ordinary people. It was originally meant to be sung. It is also called short story in verse or a narrative song. Blank verse. Blank verse is unrhymed verse in iambic pentameter. Marlowe made very effective use of blank verse as a medium of dramatic expression, and so did Shakespeare. John Milton also made masterly use of blank verse in his Paradise Lost. Burlesque. Burlesque is an absurd or comically exaggerated imitation of something, especially in a literary or dramatic work, a parody. It intends to cause laughter by caricaturing the spirit of serious works. Cacophony. Cacophony is the mixture of harsh and unharmonious sounds. It is a harsh, discordant mixture of sounds. In other words, it refers to harsh, clashing, or dissonant sounds, often produced by combinations of words that require a clipped, explosive delivery, or words that contain a number of plosive consonants such as B, D, G, K, P, and T. It is actually the opposite of euphony. For example, the sounds of asking prices, snatching articles, yelling, and packing in the brand shop having flat discount. Catharsis. Catharsis is the process of releasing strong feelings, for example through plays or other artistic activities, as a way of providing relief from anger, suffering, etc. It is a purification and purgation of emotions, as pity and fear through art. Climax. Climax is the point of highest tension in which the conflict in the story starts resolving. In other words, it is the point at which the conflict of the story begins to reach a turning point and begins to be resolved. Comic relief. Comic relief is the inclusion of a humorous character or scene in a serious work in order to relieve tension. Conceit. Conceit is an elaborate figure of speech which is used to compare two different or dissimilar things. John Donne masterfully used conceit in his poetry. For instance, he envisions two entwined lovers as the points of a compass. Conflict. Conflict is the struggle between two opposing forces that is the basis for plot. In literature, conflict is the problem or struggle that the protagonist must face. Often, the conflict is between the protagonist and an antagonist. There are two types of conflicts: internal conflict and external conflict. Internal conflict is the conflict that the protagonist experiences within himself, and external conflict is the conflict that the protagonist experiences between himself and another person or another thing. In Hamlet, Hamlet has both kinds of conflict. He has a conflict with his uncle, whom he suspects of murdering his father in order to be king, and he also has some internal conflict as he struggles with his own feelings during the play. Connotation. Connotation is an understood cultural or emotional association that a word or phrase has with its literal meanings. For example, blue is a color, but it is also a word used to describe a feeling of sadness. As in the sentence, she is feeling blue. It means she is feeling sad. Consonance. Consonance is a poetic device that is used to create music in a line of poetry. So, consonance means repetition of last consonant sounds of words in a phrase, line, or a sentence. For example, sun and moon. Here, the N sound is consonance. Denotation. Denotation is a literal meaning of a word or phrase. It is also called the dictionary meaning. So you should understand denotation in reference with connotation. Connotation means the associated meanings, whereas denotation means the dictionary meanings. Denouement. Denouement is the very end of the story or the final part of a play, where all the plots are tied up and all the questions are answered. This is the conclusion of the play, where all the conflicts are resolved. Didactic. Didactic is a type of work that aims to instruct or teach a moral lesson. Discourse. Discourse denotes a written and spoken communication that varies in different contexts. It is the use of language in speech and writing to produce meanings. Dramatic monologue. Dramatic monologue is a type of poetry written in speech form by an individual character. It does not mean the actual drama which is acted on the stage. It is essentially dramatic in principle. The poet lets the character of the story speak his or her own words. The poet uses speaker who speaks in the poet. In England, Robert Browning is its most important practitioner. Dystopia. Dystopia is an imaginary place or state in which everything is extremely bad, unpleasant, undesirable, or horrible. It is the opposite to utopia. Elegy. Elegy is a poem of mourning. It is usually a lament for the dead. It is written on someone's death. Epic poetry. Epic poetry is a long poem narrating the adventurous or victorious story of a hero or history of a nation. For example, Milton's Paradise Lost is an epic. Epigraph. Epigraph is a phrase, quotation, or a poem written in the beginning of a work. It may serve as a preface or summary of the work. For example, the epigraph of T.S. Eliot's poem The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is a 6-line quotation from Canto 27 of the Inferno by the Italian poet Dante. Epilogue. Epilogue is a final chapter of the work of literature that concludes the events or reports the fates of the characters. In other words, it is a speech at the end of a play or book that acts as a conclusion to what has happened. For example, in Oedipus Rex, at the end of the play, the chorus gives the epilogue where the chorus concludes the play. If it can happen to Oedipus, it can happen to anyone. Epiphany. Epiphany is an experience of life-changing sudden realization. Apostrophe. Apostrophe is the repetition of words or phrases at the end of clauses or sentences. For example, government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. So this particular phrase, the people means that is called apostrophe. Epitaph. Epitaph is a short text honoring the deceased person. The statement is often inscribed on tombstone. Epitaph means the words that are written or said about a dead person, especially words on a gravestone. It is the inscription on a tombstone or monument in memory of the person or people buried there. Epitaph also refers to a brief literary piece that sums up the life of a dead. Euphony. Euphony is a blend of sweet and melodious sounds. It is the opposite to cacophony. Exposition. Exposition is the background information at the beginning of the story, such as setting, characters, and conflicts. In a short story, the exposition appears in the opening paragraphs, whereas in a novel, the exposition is usually part of the first chapter. Fable. Fable is a brief tale told to illustrate a moral. It is a kind of traditional story that teaches a moral lesson, and it especially has animal characters. Falling action. Falling action means the events that lead to a resolution after the climax. Flashback. Flashback is an event or a scene that happened before the beginning of the story or occurred at an earlier point of the story. Foil. Foil is a character that contrasts with another character in the story to foreground the qualities of another character. Foil is a character who provides a striking contrast to another character. For example, Creon is a foil character in Oedipus Rex. He provides a striking contrast to Oedipus the king. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is a clue from the writer's side to indicate events that will occur later in the story. Hagiography. Hagiography is a biography of a saint or an icon of any religion in the world. Haiku. Haiku is a type of Japanese poem consisting of 17 syllables divided into 3 lines with 5, 7 and 5 syllables. Means in the first line there are 5 syllables, in the second line there are 7 syllables, and in the third line there are 5 syllables. Hamartia. Hamartia is a Greek word which means to err or to miss the mark. It is tragic flaw of a character and specifically of the protagonist. Hubris was the hamartia of Oedipus, the king. Holograph. Holograph is a piece of writing that has been written by hand by its author. Hubris. Hubris is the excessive pride or overconfidence in a character that leads him towards foolish decisions. The character of King Oedipus provides a classic example of a character who suffers from hubris or excessive pride. Due to his hubris, he attempts to defy prophecies of gods, but ended up doing what he feared the most. Hyperbole. Hyperbole is a figure of speech in which a character purposely or intentionally exaggerates for emphasis or for humorous effect. Irony. Irony is a contrast between appearance and reality. When there are two contradictory meanings of the same situation, event, or dialogue, it is called irony. There are 3 types of irony: verbal, situational, and dramatic. Verbal irony means when a writer says one thing but means something entirely different. It is called verbal irony. Situational irony occurs when something happens that is entirely different from what is expected, and dramatic irony occurs when the reader knows information that the characters do not. Metaphor. Metaphor is a figure of speech in which a comparison or analogy is made between two seemingly unlikely things, as in the phrase evening of life. Metonymy. Metonymy is a figure of speech that substitutes the name of a related object, person, or idea for the subject at hand. In other words, it is the substitution of a term naming an object closely associated with the word in mind for the word itself, as a crown for king. And for example, if you say I'm reading Shakespeare these days, it does not mean that you are reading the personality of Shakespeare. It means you are reading the work of Shakespeare. Like this, there is another example: the kettle is boiling. It does not mean that the kettle itself is boiling. It means the water in the kettle is boiling. Monologue. Monologue is a speech delivered by a character in order to reveal his mental thoughts aloud. Onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is the formation of sounds with its referent. It is the use of words containing sounds similar to the sounds they describe. For example, meow meow, quack quack. So these are the natural sounds and they are written as they are. Oxymoron. Oxymoron is a figure of speech that has contradicting elements together. In other words, two contradictory words or phrases are combined in a single expression, giving the effect of a condensed paradox. For example, living death, wise fool, cruel kindness. This term has its origin in Greek language, and it can be divided into two. For example, oxus. Oxus means sharp and moron means foolish. So as a whole, the term oxymoron means sharp, foolish. Paradox. Paradox is a statement containing obvious contradictions. You should have a clear distinction between paradox and oxymoron. Oxymoron is a figure of speech, whereas paradox is a statement. A figure of speech is a word or phrase which is used in a non-literal sense for poetic or rhetorical effect. So paradox is a statement that contains obvious contradictions. For example, nobody goes to that restaurant. It's too crowded. It has the contradicting elements in a statement. Another example may be, don't go near the water till you have learned how to swim. Parody. Parody is a piece of writing, music, or acting that deliberately imitates or copy the style of a serious work of literature for the purpose of criticism or humorous effect or for flattering tribute. Pastiche. Pastiche is a creative work that imitates the great works of the past in order to pay respect and honor to them. Peripety. Peripety is a turning point of protagonist's life from good to bad. It is a sudden change in the story which results a negative reversal of circumstances. In other words, it is a sudden reversal of fortune or change in circumstances. In Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, the peripety occurs towards the end of the play when the messenger brings Oedipus news of his parentage. Peripety occurs after Anagnorisis, that is discovery. Personification. Personification is a figure of speech in which human qualities or characteristics are attributed to an animal, object, or concept. For example, the virgin morning was peeping through the clouds. Prologue. Prologue is the introductory section that provides background detail of the story. So it is actually the exposition, or you can say the introduction of a story. Protagonist. Protagonist is actually the type of character. Protagonist is the main character, means protagonist is the character of first importance. He sets the action in motion. The protagonist plays the central part in a drama. And you should also know other types of characters. For example, deuteragonist. The deuteragonist is the second most important character after the protagonist and before the tritagonist. The deuteragonist may be with or against the protagonist. It depends upon the structure of the plot. Tritagonist. Tritagonist is the third most important character of the drama. Antagonist. Antagonist is the character that stands as rival to the protagonist. He is the villain. There is no antagonist in the drama Oedipus Rex. Oedipus Rex himself is his antagonist. A foil. A foil is a character whose traits or qualities contrast with those of the protagonist. Writers use foil to emphasize differences between two characters. For example, a handsome character might be a foil for one who is unattractive. By using foil, authors call attention to the strengths or weaknesses of a main character. For example, in some ways, Creon is a foil to Oedipus, as he shows a sense of justice and compassion that Oedipus does not. Confident. Confident is a character that provides a ready ear to which the protagonist can address certain remarks which should be heard by the audience but not by the other characters. This type of character is most commonly a closest friend or trusted servant of the main character. Confidence serves as a device for revealing the mind and intention of the main character. The character who becomes the confidant in Oedipus Rex is Choragus. Choragus becomes the confidant as Oedipus always shares his thinking and feeling with Choragus. In Shakespeare's play Hamlet, Horatio is the confident character. So then we have stock character. Stock character is a stereotypical character who is not developed as an individual but as a collection of traits and mannerisms. These characters are easily recognized by the audience due to their repeated appearance and familiar roles. For example, a comic, a servant, a fool, a coward, a crooked stepmother, and a wicked witch. They are easily recognized by the audience. Chorus. Chorus is a group of actors and singers who function as a unit and who perform as a unit and who sing as a unit. Chorus is the distinctive feature of the Greek tragedy. The chorus is there in Oedipus Rex. Choragus. The choragus is the leader of the chorus. The choragus has the liberty to speak and participate in the main action. The choragus has the liberty to comment on the action. Flat character. Flat characters are relatively uncomplicated and do not change throughout the course of a work, and they remain flat, they remain unchanged throughout the course of a drama or of a story. Round characters are complex characters. They undergo development. Round characters learn something during the course of the play or story. Then we have another literary term, pun. Pun is a form of word play that exploits multiple meanings of a term or of similar sounding words for an intended humorous or rhetorical effect. For example, in the sentence, this home has 5 stories, the word stories has pun. The stories may refer to the building having 5 stories, and the word stories may also refer to the stories to be told. Rhyme. Rhyme is the correspondence of sound between words or the endings of words, especially when these are used at the ends of lines of poetry. For example, what is this life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare. Care, stare. These are the rhyming words. Satire. Satire is the use of humor or exaggeration to criticize foolish customs or ideas for improving society. In other words, satire is the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity, particularly in the context of contemporary politics. Simile. Simile is a figure of speech in which two seemingly unlike things are compared. The comparison is made explicit by the use of a word or phrase such as like, as, than, similar to, resembles, or seems. As in the sentence, he was as strong as a bull. So here is the example of simile. Soliloquy. Soliloquy is a speech delivered by a character on the stage to inform the audience about the character's thoughts and plans. You should note the difference between aside and soliloquy. We have discussed aside before. Stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness is to present flow of thoughts or multiple thoughts or feelings of a mind. It refers to a person's thoughts and conscious reactions to events perceived as a continuous flow. And it is important to note that the term was introduced by William James in his book Principles of Psychology that was published in 1890. And it is also a literary style in which a character's thoughts, feelings and reactions are depicted in a continuous flow, uninterrupted by objective description or conventional dialogue. James Joyce, Virginia Woolf and Anton Chekhov are the most notable practitioners of this term stream of consciousness. Syllogism. Syllogism is a logical argument based on deductive reasoning. It is a way of arguing in which two statements are used to prove that the third statement is true. For example, all humans must die. I am a human. Therefore, I must die. Another example may be, all dogs are animals. All animals have 4 legs. Therefore, all dogs have 4 legs. Synecdoche. Synecdoche is a figure of speech in which a part of something stands for the whole thing, or a whole is used to represent a part of something. For example, in this sentence, England lost by 6 wickets. England means the English cricket team. Utopia. Utopia is an imagined society which is peaceful and perfect and where everyone is happy. A utopia is an imagined community or society that possesses highly desirable or nearly perfect qualities for its citizens. And it is important to note that this term was coined by Sir Thomas More. in his book Utopia, that was published in 1516, that describes a fictional island society in the South Atlantic Ocean off the coast of South America. So these are the literary terms, and in this lecture we have discussed 70 literary terms that are very important for the students of literature. Thank you for your kind attention. Stay blessed.